Okay, so we'll be going over the review sheet for your fourth test for this quarter. So let's take a look at number 1. It says find the amplitude, the number of cycles, the period, the midline range, and you need to graph one curve. All right, so let's see here. Okay, so I have the equation f of x is equal to 4 sine 1/2 x minus 1. Okay, so let's write down our information. I'm going to write it right down here. So we have the amplitude is equal to 4. Okay, so the amplitude is equal to the absolute value of 4, which is 4. The number of cycles is the absolute value of 1/2, which is equal to 1/2. Now remember, the amplitude is how high and how low it goes from the midline, and the number of cycles is how much of the curve you see in a 2 pi interval. So we have the period is 2 pi over b, 2 pi over 1/2, which is 4 pi. And what period means is when you will see one complete cycle. All right, so the number of slashes is 4 times b. 4 times 1/2 is equal to 2. And then we have our x scale is 2 pi over the number of slashes. So that's 2 pi over 2, which is pi. We need the midline. That's the line that the graph goes up and down around. Y equals -1, sorry. And the range. Okay, so starting at -1, we're going up 4 and down 4. So down 4 would put me at -5, and up 4 would put me at 3. All right, so now what we want to do is we want to graph this. So I'm just going to move this up here. Okay, so there's f of x, there's x. All right, so my midline is at -1. So here's -1. Here's my midline. Okay, we are going up to 3, down to -5. All right, so now it says to graph one cycle. Now, this is half a curve in 2 pi. So that means I need to double it to get one full cycle. So instead of having 2 slashes, right, 2 slashes for half a cycle, I'm going to have to double it so that I get one full cycle. So I actually need 4 slashes. Okay, each slash, this will stay the same. Each slash is pi, pi, 2 pi, 3 pi, 4 pi. And that makes sense because it says I should have the period. I should have one complete cycle in 4 pi. All right, so it is a sine curve. The sine curve starts at its midline. It is a positive sine curve, so it's going to go up to its max. So at pi, I'll be up at the max. And I'll come back down to the midline, down to the min, and back up to the midline. Oh, sorry, to the midline. That's not the midline. Just the midline. Okay, and then you can just graph it. Okay, and that's it for 1A. Let's take a look at 1B. Okay, so 1B is the same thing. So we're graphing and finding all the key features for g of x is equal to -10. Cosine 2x plus 3. All right, so let's start with the amplitude. It's the absolute value of -10, which is 10. That means it's going up and down 10 units. The number of cycles is 2, which means 2 cycles in 2 pi, period. 2 pi over 2, which is pi. That's 1 LC, 1 complete curve. The number of slashes is 4 times 2, which is 8. We need our x scale, which is 2 pi over 8, which is pi over 4. the midline, y equals 3, and your range. Okay, from 3, we're going up 10 and down 10. So down 10 would put us at -7, and up 3 would put us at 13. Up 10, sorry, put us at 13 from 3. All right, so now let's graph this. Oh. Okay, so let me draw my axes. Okay, so this is g of x, and we have x here. And my midline is at 3. There's y equals 3. All right, now let's talk about the number of, I'm also going up to 13 and down to -7. All right, so now I do need to figure out how many slashes I actually need. Now, if you look here, I have 2 cycles in 2 pi. I don't want 2 cycles, I want 1 cycle. So I have to take my number of slashes and split that in half. So instead of having 8 slashes, I'm going to have 4. And the first slash is going to be pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, which is pi over 2, 3 pi over 4, 4 pi over 4, which is pi, and that makes sense because the period is pi, which means I'll see 1 complete cycle in pi. All right, it is a cosine curve, but it is negative, so that means I have to start down. So I'll be at -7. At pi over 4, I'll be at my midline. 2 pi over 4, I'll be at my max. At 3 pi over 4, the midline, and at pi, I'll be down at my min, so it'll look like this. And that's 1 cycle. All right, let's take a look at 2. Okay, so number 2 says to write the equation of a cosine curve that has an amplitude of 8, has a period of pi over 3, and has a range of 0 to 16, and it increases from 0 to pi over 6. All right, so since I have my amplitude is 8, all right, so that means my A is equal to 8. And they give us the period. Now the period, we'll use that to get our B value. So remember, the period is 2 pi over B, and that has to equal pi over 3. So I'll cross multiply. I get B pi is equal to 6 pi. Divide by pi. And I get B is equal to 6. So let's put that over here. B is equal to 6. Okay, we also have the range is from, it's going from 0 all the way up to 16, so I need my midline. Sorry. My midline would be right in the middle, which is going to be 8. All right, so that'd be y is equal to 8. And now this is important here. It says from 0 to pi, it's increasing, which means since it's cosine, right, and from 0 on your axes, right, it's increasing. It means it's going up like this. So that means it's starting down at its min. So that means actually your A over here has to be negative. Okay, so now we can write the curve. So it's y equals -8 cosine 6x plus 8. All right, let's take a look at 3. All right, so let's take a look at 3. So we have here all right, so for number 3, we are given the function, and the functions are f of x, g of x, and h of x. And we're looking to find the average rate of change. And here's the interval. Now remember, my interval are my x values. So I have an x value of pi over 2 and an x value of 2 pi. And I have function f of x, which is an equation, g of x, which is a table, and h of x, which is a graph. Okay, so let's start with the equation over here. So we're starting with this guy here. So I'm going to now write down my x values and find my y values. All right, so I know one of my x values here is pi over 2. And my other x value is 2 pi. All right, so I need to get my y value. So we have to plug the x into the equation and solve for y. So I'm going to start off with f of pi over 2. You're going to leave it in radians. So I have 4 sine pi over 2 plus 2. So put your calculator in radians and plug this into your calculator. And you get 6. So my point is pi over 2 comma 6. Now you're going to do f of 2 pi. So we have 4 sine 2 pi plus 2. Plug that into your calculator. Make sure you're in radians, and you get that's equal to 2. So my other y value is 2. So I have 2 pi comma 2. All right, so now I need to find now I can find the average rate of change. So the average rate of change, remember, is y minus y over x minus x. So the average rate of change is y minus y over x minus x. So we're going to have 6 minus, I'm going to start off with the 2 here. So we're going to do 2 minus 6 over 2 pi minus pi over 2. So 2 minus 6 is negative 4. Now you have to leave this in radians. So all you're going to plug in right now into your calculator, because we have to keep the radians, is you're going to plug in 2 minus 1/2 here. So plug that in your calculator. That's okay. You're going to get a fraction. We're going to leave it as a fraction. So it's 3 pi over 2. Now we're going to do same change flip. So it's negative 4 times 2 over 3 pi, which is negative 8 over 3 pi. Now, if you want to put in, this is your average rate of change. You have to leave it in a fraction form. You can't put it in a decimal form because it doesn't say it around. So this is the exact value for your average rate of change for f of x. You can put it in a decimal form so that you can compare the decimals, but this here is your actual average rate of change. So let's write that down. So for f of x, so let me erase this here. So I have negative 8 over 3 pi. So I'm going to write that over here. This is for f of x. Negative 8 over 3 pi. Remember, that's the average rate of change. If you want to put that in to know what the decimal is so you can compare, it's negative 0.8488, and that goes on. All right, now let's talk about g of x. All right, so g of x, so my x is pi over 2, my y is 1, and my x is 2 pi, and my y is 3. So remember, it's y minus y over x minus x, so the average rate of change, 3 minus 1 over 2 pi minus pi over 2. So that's 2 over. Now we already had 2 pi minus pi over 2. That we did that before. That was 3 pi over 2. So do same change flip. So it's 2 times 2 over 3 pi, which is 4 over 3 pi. Okay, so let's write that down. So just remember that. So it's 4 over 3 pi. Obviously, you wouldn't erase all of this on your test. So that was 4 over 3 pi. And you can plug that in your calculator, but this is the average rate of change. That's approximately 0.4244. All right, now we need to do h of x. So h of x over here, so my x is pi over 2, comma, pi over 2 is 1. And 2 pi, my y value is negative 1, right? So I have here, and the other one is over a little bit further here. Here. Okay, so the average rate of change is going to be negative 1 minus 1 over 2 pi minus pi over 2. So that's negative 2 over 3 pi over 2. So do same change flip, so it's negative 2 times 2 over 3 pi, which is negative 4 over 3 pi. Okay, so let's write that down. Negative 4 over 3 pi. So that is negative 4 over 3 pi, which is about, it's approximately negative 4.22. Oh, sorry, that is not correct. That is actually approximately negative 0.4244. Okay, so now we need to compare these. So remember, when we compare, try not to, you have to kind of like overlook the negative. So we are going from least to greatest. So these two are actually the same average rate of change. Even though one's negative, they still are the same rate of change. They're still changing at the same rate. One's just negative and one's positive. So you have h of x is first, and then you could put g of x. So you could switch those around, h of x and g of x, since they are the same. And then this one is my larger, and that would be f of x. Okay, so let's take a look at number 4. Okay, so number 4 says to list the factors and find the 0/roots. So we're looking for the zeros of the functions below. So let's start with f of x is equal to 3x cubed plus 2x squared minus x. So I notice there is a GCF, so I factor out the GCF. So it's x times 3x squared plus 2x minus 1. Now I'm going to factor using master product. So I multiply the first times the last. I get negative 3x squared. So what numbers multiply to 3 minus to 2 would be positive 3x and negative 1x. That gives me my positive 2x. And I have the ends here. And now I'm going to factor by grouping. So the GCF of the first group is 3x times x plus 1. GCF of the second group is negative 1 times x plus 1. So my factors for f of x, remember we have the GCF that we took out. So f of x, these are my factors, is equal to x times 3x minus 1 times x plus 1. So remember, these are my factors. All right, now my zeros. So I take these and I set these equal to 0. So x equals 0. 3x minus 1 equals 0. Add 1, divide by 3, x equals 1/3. X plus 1 equals 0. Minus 1, we get x is equal to negative 1. So these here, those are my zeros. So what it means is this, that f of negative 1 equals 0. When x is 1/3, my y is 0. When x is 0, my y is also equal to 0. All right, let's try b. All right, so b is g of x is equal to x squared plus 12x plus 11. So we're going to factor. So when I factor g of x, I get x plus 11 and x plus 1. So these are my factors. Then I want to make my t-chart. I get x plus 11 equals 0, x plus 1 equals 0. Minus 11, I get x equals negative 11. I minus 1, I get x is equal to negative 1. These are my zeros. So what it means is this, that when x is negative 1, my y is 0. When x is negative 11, my y is 0. Okay, so let's take a look at number 5. Okay, so number 5 is a subtraction of polynomials. So I have f of x here, and I have g of x, and I'm subtracting. It's f of x minus g of x. All right, so I'm going to set this up, and I'm going to set them up in parentheses, side by side. F of x comes first. So I have, in parentheses, negative 64x to the third plus 7x squared minus 25x plus 123, minus, now g of x, negative 47x to the third minus 2x squared plus 58x plus 33. So now you guys, I'm sure, remember that when we subtract polynomials, you have to distribute the negative all the way through. So the first parenthesis is going to stay the same. So it's negative 64x to the third plus 7x squared minus 25x plus 123. Distribute the negative, I get positive 47x cubed plus 2x squared minus 58x minus 33. Now all we're going to do is combine like terms. All right, so I have negative 64x to the third. There's a negative in there. And I'm going to combine that with positive 47x to the third. That's positive 17x to the third. And then I have 7x squared plus 2x squared. That's positive 9x squared. And then we're going to do negative 25x, and negative 58x is negative 83x. Oh, and I'm sorry, this was supposed to be negative 17. Hopefully I said negative 17. Negative 64x cubed and positive 47x cubed, that's negative 17. Sorry. It should be negative 17. And the last one here would be positive 123, and negative 33 is positive 90. So this would be my final answer here. Okay, so let's flip it over and take a look at the back. Okay, so let's take a look at number 6. All right, so it says, given the graph below, you want to find the amplitude, the number of cycles, the period, and the midline. So what you want to do first is you want to find that midline. Okay, so you have to find the midline in order to find the amplitude and stuff. So count the number of boxes you have. You have, starting from here, from the min, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that's 10 units up and down. So 10 divided by 2 would be 5. So that means 5, I need 5 up and 5 down. So let's count 5, starting at the min. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So here would be my midline, right here. So notice I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So my midline is y is equal to 2. All right, so my amplitude, right? So we're going up and down 5. My amplitude is equal to 5. I also need the number of cycles. So now I could tell that it is a sine curve because it is starting at the midline. So let's see how many complete curves. This is 2 pi back here. So how many complete curves? Here's 1s. There's one curve. Here's 2 curves. And here's 3 curves. So my number of cycles is equal to 3. And now I want the period. The period is when you see one complete curve. So starting here, which is right here, that's one complete curve. And this is at 2 pi over 3. Or you could have done 2 pi over b, which we know which is the number of cycles. So it's 2 pi over 3, okay, for the period. All right, number 7. It says to identify whether it's what type of equation it is. So notice here for 7a, there's this e, and this is compound continuously. Okay. 7 is a growth. And the reason why I know it's growth is because I have a number inside there that's greater than 1. Because remember, growth is 1 plus the rate. Okay, raised to the t power. Okay, and so this is exponential growth. And remember, you have to have this exponent up here. That exponent has to be positive. And notice here, I have a number in here that's less than 1. That's 1 minus your rate raised to the t power. So this is exponential decay because it's going down. Okay, so let's take a look at 8. Okay, so 8 says, residents of upstate New York are accustomed to large amounts of snow, with snowfall often exceeding 6 inches in one day. In one city, such snowfalls were recorded for 2 seasons and are as follows in inches. So we have this data here. What is the mean and the population standard deviation for this data to the nearest hundredth? So you need to type this into your calculator. So put this on pause and plug it into the calculator. So you go into Stat, Edit. If you have anything in your list 1 or list 2, clear it out. You're going to plug this in as just one list because we don't have a frequency. All right, so just one list, just plug it in. Okay, put me on pause and plug it in. Don't just copy down what I put. Actually do it. All right. So hopefully you plugged it in and now we're back. So we have, remember you have to write down your calculator screen. So we have x bar is 9.45. We have the sum of the x's is 170.2. The sum of the x's squared is 1861.58. The sample standard deviation is 3.8520000584. Standard deviation, which is also your population standard deviation, is 3.7434711684. N is 18. That's how many pieces of data you plugged in. Min X is 66.1, which is the smallest number you plugged in. Quartile 1 is 7. That's the 25th percentile. The median, which is the second quartile, 50th percentile, is 8.45. We have quartile 3, which is 75th percentile, is 9.5. And I'll put it up here. Your max X, sorry, ran out of room, is 21.5, which is the largest piece of data you plugged in. All right, so we want the mean. Oh, and this also had a bar over it. All right, so we want the mean, right, X bar, which is your mu, is equal to 9.46. That's to the nearest hundredth. And your population standard deviation, which is your sigma x, is 3.74. All right, next, number 9. Okay, so number 9 says, given the mean and the standard deviation, find the interval for 95th percentile is centered on. So remember, 95th percentile, that's your margin of error. Your margin of error is 2 standard deviations. So if my mean is right here in the middle, that's 65. I want 2 standard deviations to the right, and I want 2 standard deviations to the left. So if my standard deviation is 3, so 1 standard deviation will put me at 68. 2 standard deviations will put me at 71. That's to the right. To the left, going down 3, 1 standard deviation would put me at 62, and then go down again, another standard deviation would put me at 59. So that would be from 59 to 71. So 59 to 71. Or you could use brackets, 59 to 71. Okay, and the same thing for B. All right, so I have my mean is right in the middle, 121. So my standard deviation is 4.7. So 1 standard deviation would put me at 125.7. So 2 standard deviations, which is what I want, 95% is 130.4. 1 standard deviation to the left would be 116.3. 2 standard deviations to the left would be 111.6. So that would be from 111.6 to 130.4. Okay, and the last one. says, number 10, describe how you would perform an experiment to determine if sugar causes diabetes. All right, so you would have to break your sample into two groups. So break into two groups. Okay, one group would get a sugar pill. And the other group, would get a placebo. Okay, and then what you would do after a certain amount of time, you would compare the results. Okay, that's it. All right, have a good night. See you guys tomorrow. Watch the video again if you need to, whatever you need to do. This is going to be the last test for the quarter. All right, have a good night, everyone.